Hey everyone and welcome. With what's going on in the UK at the moment, I thought we'd revisit possibly the most lied about man in British history.
The core is rotten, and I can behold the tide.
Now this is Enoch Powell, a politician who actually cared for his country and his constituents and was backed by over 70% of the people cross-party in the nation at the time. He was then thus vilified, even with public support. So I thought we'd revisit what he said. Now this was in response to being branded a racist. Have a listen to this on the Dick Cavett show.
Do you understand why people call you a racist?
It is one of the modern terms of abuse, and the term of abuse is the more effective, the less defined it is. Then you can throw it at anybody and anything. But I find this word race very irrelevant in the British context. Indeed, it's rather a word which we've borrowed from America. We now know that unless some drastic change happens, large parts of many of our cities will, by the beginning of the next century, be occupied by a population which has nothing in common with the people of this country. Now, I've defined the problem.
Yes.
But of course, there was a terrific explosion of relief that at last somebody had drawn attention, not we now know to the full dimensions, for I underestimated the numbers in that speech, but at any rate to what were then thought to be the full dimensions of the problem. And people who had watched year after year, particularly in the areas concerned, something happening which was altering their lives, but nobody apparently caring, nobody referring to it, nobody worrying about it.
Perhaps we can find...
But at least, somebody's spoken about it. Now we can face it.
Now we know how that speaking out ended for Enoch Powell, don't we?
It was said, for example, that you became the hero of the skinheads, who were
the skinheads? I became the hero of 90% of the people of this country for having said what they were waiting for somebody to say, for identifying a danger of which they were conscious but couldn't believe that nobody would see it or point it out.
I'm not interrupting your contribution. I'm simply offering a point. What I want to ask you, one or two issues. Are you worrying about the increase in numbers or the increase in the number of people who who the population at large feel anxious about because of some certain recognizable feature they have? Are you worrying about the increase in the size of the population or the increase of a certain element of the population which is in some way have features which are like...
Of course, we are not concerned with the increase in the total population from, say, 55 to 60 million. We are concerned with the increase in an element of a population which is profoundly different, thinks itself different, is seen as different from the rest. And that is where the significance both of number and of concentration comes in. Now, it could be as serious, indeed it could be more serious, if that different population were white and not coloured. I can well imagine that if they were, for example, Germans or Russians who were going to be occupying 2/5 or a half of Birmingham at the beginning of the next century, we should... Yes, in occupation, living in it. But as with some of your American cities, a considerable proportion. In the case of Birmingham, it will be at least 2/5 will be occupied by the immigrants and their descendants by the early years of the next century.
Above all, their descendants.
Yes, indeed. Yes, but those descendants will still be thoroughly separate, for the most part, from the rest of the population because of the numbers. If the numbers were small, then, of course, like any very small minority, they would filter into the population. But nobody seriously imagines that if 2/5 of Birmingham consists of a first generation of descendants born here, of people from the West Indies, from Africa, and from Asia, there will not be a profound difference between that part of the population and the rest.
I will put a link to the full interview with Dick Cavett, because it was quite an interesting one. But I did pick it out because what he warned about, even then, he underestimated. Let me know what you think about it in the comments, everyone. I'd like to know your opinion. Stay sane. See you on the next one.